It's time for TigerNet Talk with L. Swan.
That's why Carolina's in Chapel Hill and USC's in California. And the university in this state always has been, always will be, Clemson. Print that, tweet that.
And I hope they come in undefeated. That's what I told you before the game. Our team believes. Our team believes. They got heart. We got greatness in us. They say we can't do it. What they say now?
Down go the Champs. Auburn's 17-game win streak comes to an end.
Welcome back into another edition of TigerNet Talk, episode number 162. Thanks for being here with us. Got a lot of folks here in the chat room on Spreecast, broadcasting on the front page of TigerNet.com as well as the front page of ClemsonSportsTalk.com. Awesome stuff going on around Tiger Town and a lot of pressure, I think, for Clemson Tiger fans as they began to realize that perhaps Chad Morris would be the guy heading towards Texas Tech. But you can breathe some fresh air, at least for a season, because it wasn't to be, as former Texas Tech quarterback Cliff Kingsbury was tabbed the head coach. And there were pluses and minuses for Texas Tech for both of these guys. And before the news came out, we had kind of gone through and looked at everything and thought about the ins and the outs of it all. And we were going to do a whole big spiel about who would be chosen. And I personally didn't think it was going to be Chad Morris. There were certain things that were coming out of Lubbock, Texas that made me say, you know what? This just doesn't seem like Morris's job. And Texas Tech is a divided fan base, for those of you that don't know, going back to Mike Leach and what happened there during his tenure. And everybody wasn't excited about the way things ended for Leach. They weren't exactly fired up about the hire of Tommy Tuberville. Tuberville did a good job at Auburn during his tenure there, but he didn't exactly fire up the fan base when he was tabbed as the next head coach at Texas Tech. Now, some people said, oh, it was such a surprise when he left to go to Cincinnati, and maybe it was. But when you think back to the incident on the field this season, the ripping the headset incident off of a coordinator's head, and maybe not a coordinator, but an assistant coach, I think you look more at the fact that it was a slap, and maybe there was more to that behind the scenes, and perhaps Tommy Tuberville felt like he was best to get out of Dodge while he could. You know how they are out in Texas. Somebody will want to meet you at high noon in the streets and walk off 10 paces. Maybe that's what was up with Double T leaving Double T. That was always hot too. But we got a lot of folks with us here in the chat room. I do thank you for coming in and joining us. Hashtag TN Talk is the way you can get to us on Twitter. You can also reach us by email, clemson81@gmail.com. We've got a number of emails to get to. Our man Norm once again called in, took advantage of the send voicemail area on ClemsonSportsTalk.com. And if you want to call us live to talk about Chad Morris, Clemson, whatever, 803-450-0086. The phone lines are always open, and I do thank you for stopping by, no doubt about it. But let's talk about it, the pluses and minuses. And I believe it was Tommy who tweeted to me earlier. He said, look, can you just talk about Chad Morris for 2 minutes? Can we just limit it to 2 minutes? So I say to myself, well, I would like to limit it to 2 minutes, but if I do that, I don't think I'm going to be able to cover everything that needs to be said about the situation, about Chad Morris, his future at Clemson, the way that's maybe affected some recruiting. And we've got, the whole gamut of things to get to. But one thing that really made me realize that this wasn't Chad Morris's job was the more that you heard out of Lubbock that you can't wash the A&M stain, or I even heard somebody refer to it as the A&M stink, off of Chad Morris. Morris, of course, a graduate of Texas A&M. Now, Cliff Kingsbury, even though he was at A&M, coaching Johnny Heisman as the offensive coordinator there, he was still their guy, their boy. This is equated to maybe, in a lot of ways, if somewhere down the road The opportunity existed. And I would love to say Steven Garcia, but obviously I don't think that's going to be the case. In some way, shape, or form, if Marcus Lattimore, if he were to ascend to the coaching ranks and have an opportunity to come coach at Clemson as the head coach, but C.J. Spiller was out there as well, and the fan base was splintered, who's going to reunite Clemson's fan base better? A hire of Marcus Lattimore or a hire of C.J. Spiller? It doesn't take long for you to start realizing that. It doesn't take long to start putting the pieces together. Now, while Chad Morris comes from Texas, and we know that maybe he wants to get back, he's going to command arguably the highest dollar of any assistant coach in college football taking a head coaching role because he's already the highest paid assistant in America. Big time money. The surprising thing, and I haven't seen it yet, and maybe it's come out, but I will be interested to know what Kingsbury's final salary is and how big will it rise for Texas Tech? Are they going to be willing to unload truckloads of cash for a 33-year-old guy who has zero head coaching experience, is basically just out of the NFL, did a little bit of time at Houston, and now this 1 year at Texas A&M? I'm not so sure that if I'm Texas Tech, I'm backing the trucks up. I think I'm a little bit cautious. But as a Clemson person, you know a young coach can get the job done. We have seen a guy like Danny Ford step in at 30 years old basically and take your team in just a few short years to the national championship. Young guys can motivate. Young guys can be very well attached to the teams that they are coaching. That may have been part of the secret of Danny Ford's success to some degree. You could say the gritty nature coming out of Alabama, playing for Bear Bryant, and all of that, but I think you could easily counter with the relationships that he had with the players. And that's what it all comes down to. When we were talking Charlie Harbison on Clemson Hotline Sunday night, this past Sunday at 9 p.m., the relationships are what's so big for these people. The relationships are what these players really buy into. And if a certain coach leaves, maybe a recruit goes with them. And if you get somebody else in that spot, this is what we were saying about Harbison. And you've seen some fringe things going on with players who maybe are wavering a little bit. But if you make the right hire, and this is why I think it's going to be important that Dabo gets it done, you can maybe shore some of that up. The odd thing about Chad Morris, though, getting back to that for a minute, is when you think back to the fact that he turned down Ohio State. Now, I don't know in the pantheon of college sports where you rank a bunch of teams. And I think most of us we'd love to be able to say Clemson's a top 5 job in America. But it's actually not a top 5 job. I hate the newsflash. Texas, Florida, I think you could argue Ohio State, Southern Cal, and I'll let you pick your next one. You want to throw Michigan in there? Are you a believer in Notre Dame, Alabama? Maybe one of those schools, I think many of you would agree, are the top 5 major football programs in the country. It would be an honor to be classified as such. It will be an honor to be in the top 10. Maybe you have Clemson in the top 15. But turning down a job at Ohio State as an assistant coach to Urban Meyer tells me one of two things. And I didn't think about it at the time, but now looking ahead and looking at the direction of Chad Morris and where he wants to go, it's fairly obvious that either A, Clemson is a stopping off point, which I think most people believe, or B, it's an ultimate spot that he would like to end up. Because if you go to Ohio State, you're not leaving there until that job is yours. Because I don't think you're going to have to wait out. You're not going to have to wait out Urban Meyer so long if Chad Morris were to have taken that job. It could have been his in a couple of years. Instead, because I don't think Meyer's going to be there forever. I think you saw that at Florida. He's going to get burned out. He's going to be ready to get out of the coaching ranks. Morris could have ascended to one of the top 5 programs in the country. So you sit and wonder now, is he waiting on Texas? Does he want to return home? Small town boy makes good. He goes from the high school ranks to the collegiate ranks. He does his thing in the ACC and eventually makes a move to Texas. And would Texas ever be willing to pony up for a guy that doesn't have that head coaching experience. And that may be why, that collegiate head coaching experience, and that may be why this Texas Tech job was so important to Morris, a dream job, to get in the state, to get some head coaching done. Now, with the Texas A&M vacancy, obviously, for the offensive coordinator spot, there are some people saying, hey, what about that? I'll put it out there. What do you think? Would Texas A&M open the call for $6.5 million to buy out Chad Morris right now? Their entire staff is paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million a season this past year. Would they open up the wallets to get Chad Morris there, to get him in their system, to bring home their own Aggie, give him some time in that system? It's certainly affected things so far for Clemson, I think, on the recruiting trail. It's affected, I think, the future of recruiting for Clemson because people are beginning to see what we all knew, but you didn't want to realize that it was as close as it was, and that was Chad Morris leaving Clemson University. It is coming. I do not think it will be this year. I do not think it will be the Texas A&M as an offensive coordinator because I don't think they'll pay the money. But the minute another big-time job comes open, if it's one of those top 5 jobs in the country, but passing up on Ohio State when he didn't have the huge buyout, his buyout was only $50,000 a year ago. Anyhow, it's up to you to determine what you think of this system, what you think of Coach Chad Morris. You can evaluate what he did against USC in a couple of seasons against a really good SEC defense. You'll get to find out here against LSU coming up in a few weeks. Is it enough to get the job done in the SEC? I can throw up Taj's numbers. I can throw up Johnny Football's numbers, Johnny Manziel, if you want to. And we could talk about what Texas A&M was able to do against SEC teams playing an SEC schedule in year number 1 with Kingsbury as the offensive coordinator. And we can look at what happened when Clemson has taken on the South Carolina Gamecocks, when Clemson has taken on the Auburn Tigers earlier this season, and 2 of the lowest scoring outputs and offensive performances that Clemson had this year. And I think it would be fair to assume, going into this game against LSU, win, lose, or draw, that you're probably going to have one of your worst offensive performances compared to what you did against the Dukes of the world. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Good to have Morris, though, for the long term, at least the immediate long term, another season, I'm pretty sure, at least that long. But if he leaves, does he pull the Malzahn at some point? We'll be back. Enjoy the Clemson football season at Seasons by the Lake Restaurant. Tiger Tailgate on the Terrace at Seasons Restaurant will be held every Clemson football game day, rain or shine, home or away, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. for those day games and noon to midnight for the evening kickoffs. Enjoy a large screen TV, a Bloody Mary and mimosa bar, specialty drinks, and a great tailgate menu, all on the Seasons Terrace. For more information, call 656-7444 or visit their Facebook page, facebook.com/Seasons by the Lake. I hope to see you on the terrace.
We scoop the boot, dutycalls.com. When nobody else will do it, dutycalls.com. To make that dog poop go away, call or click for a free quote today.
When nature calls, we answer. To get a free quote for dog poop removal, go to dutycalls.com now.
DOODYCALLS. Dutycalls.com.
In the Midlands area, dial 1-800-DUTY-CALLS. They're number 1 and number 2. G-Dog General Dentistry at Oak Grove is located on Highway 1 near the Barnyard Flea Market. Modern, relaxing dentistry with TVs and headphones in every room, nitrous and even oral sedation. Digital diagnostic x-rays for better quality and 85% less radiation exposure. And check out their new Clemson Patient Special. Mention that you heard about G-Dog here on the Clemson Sports Talk programs and receive an extra 5% off all services through football season. If you don't have a regular dentist, go see my dentist, Dr. Rick Jackson at G-Dog. That's General Dentistry at Oak Grove. Are you a landowner who owns more than 10 acres that's interested in selling timber or pulpwood off your property? Cross Creek Timber is a full-service timber procurement company that buys standing saw timber and pulpwood. They're staffed with professional licensed foresters and fully insured with both workers' comp and general liability insurance. Let Cross Creek Timber develop the appropriate harvesting plan for your property and answer any questions regarding forest management. Call today, 864-517-3620. That's 864-517-3620 for your free woodland evaluation, or visit www.crosscreektimber.com.
On Saturday morning, I don't sleep late. I eat an early breakfast and I head out for the gate. I gotta get there early to watch the Tigers play. The dogs are in town, we'll blow them away. I've got my orange t-shirt, got my orange hat, even orange underwear, and what you think of that? I'm an orange fan.
Welcome back into the program. Lots of people in the chat room this evening giving me some grief over the coffee mug. Want to know what's in there, man. I needed a little pick-me-up. You know, the holiday season is upon us. 2 kids, I'm wearing out a little bit. We've got this elf on our shelf that is just an atrociously scary thing. I can't get down with the elf on the shelf. Keeps me up at night thinking about that creepy guy slipping into the bedroom and, I don't know, hitting me over the head with something. But they were getting on me. My cup wasn't a Clemson mug. I had a nice Clemson mug. And I'm one of those people, I'm not a rule follower by nature. I mean, I stop at stoplights and stop signs. I'll roll the occasional stop sign in the neighborhood. But I had a nice Clemson mug, and it said, "Don't wash in the dishwasher." And I thought, well, what's it going to hurt? Just like my wife's dishes, or maybe not dishes, pots and pans. She told me not to, and I did. Breaking news, fellas, don't do that. Don't just listen to your wife. But the outside of the mug kind of fell apart. So now I'm using this tan mug, and I figured I'd jazz it up a little with a Clemson #1 sticker just to get you guys, fired up about things. I appreciate everybody being here on TigerNet Talk, episode number 162. I've never given out the episode number before. Quite frankly, the fact that we're past episode number 4 is an amazing feat in and of itself. And the fact that you have checked in with us is even better. We have got a whole lot of stuff to get to. I'm taking questions from the chat room, putting them in the queue. Apparently people can see it, or at least you can submit to the screen queue. I have no idea. I'm still getting my hands around Spreecast. Hashtag TN Talk on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. We're at Clemson Sports, bringing you Clemson news, notes, information, and more 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Your offensive coordinator, Chad Morris, returns. And you don't have to get into the argument of, is it Clemson's offense versus Chad's offense? As Dabo Swinney said, this is a Clemson offense. And lots of people came out and said, hey, Dabo, look. It wasn't so pretty back in 2010 when it was Clemson's offense. When Billy Napier was running the show, it wasn't so pretty. And I think you've got to admit to some degree that some of that had to do with talent. That team wasn't the most talented football team that Clemson's ever put on the field. Kyle Parker didn't help out by having a bad season. And I think you saw some moments there in the bowl game in Charlotte against South Florida of what Taj Boyd could maybe become. It gave you a glimmer of hope going into the offseason of 2010. Then you make the big hire. A guy like Chad Morris. Some of you criticized it. Who is Chad? Who? Tulsa. Why are we hiring Chad Morris? It didn't take long for the realization to sink in of what Chad Morris brought to the table. Now, is it Clemson's offense or Chad's offense? I think at this point you have to agree with Dabo Swinney in the fact that he makes the hire, that he makes the decision, and he knew that he was looking for a hurry-up, no-huddle offensive attack. And he went out and took a chance on a guy that ends up being one of the best offensive minds we've seen in a while. I truly believe that. He's paid that way, and there's a reason for it. And there's a reason that Urban Meyer was coming after him. And when Urban Meyer saw that offense in person, he realized just how good Chad Morris was. That's a testament to Dabo Swinney's evaluation process. And I would have to believe that Clemson would be willing to pay the money to get another great offensive coordinator once the Chad Morris tenure has run its course. Now, Tommy says that this whole Chad Morris thing may be a disaster. Not sure if we should rethink the offensive coordinator role when he's gone. And I tried to figure out exactly what Tommy meant by that. And Tommy, if you've got it, put it in the chat room, because I thought what he was saying, and I may have missed this, I thought what he was getting at was, does our next hire need to be more of an up-and-comer? Does our next hire need to be a guy who will be willing to stick it out and stay around at Clemson for a while? Maybe not somebody who's immediately looking for a head coaching position, or somebody who maybe has that in their radar, but not so quickly. And I may be completely missing what he's, the answer that he's looking for. But if I'm Dabo Swinney, I don't care if the guy wants to be here 2 years, 3 years, 10 years as the offensive coordinator. I need immediate results. And I needed them on the defensive side of the ball this past year. And if at some point down the road Chad Morris is gone, I will need it again offensively. If Clemson's defense stays where it is right now, you can't afford to not have an explosive, high-powered offense that puts up points. There is the negative effect. We know it. You know it. There is the negative effect of the number of plays we run, wearing the defense out, maybe putting the defense back on the field very rapidly, more rapidly than teams that maybe run the play clock down before they snap plays. There is a risk of the defense being right back out on the field in 45, 50 seconds. That fast of a turnaround for a defense that may be shell-shocked at times. You could have determined what happened in the NC State game by that exact same fact. It's not always, though, the guy who you don't, the guy that you expect to be the fast and shining star. Dabo Swinney, I think, has the ability, though, to go out and find somebody like Chad Morris. You could say he was rising star if you want to, but I think there was a 50%, maybe more, of the population of Clemson people who were not excited about Morris. And I've got to give Swinney a lot of credit for the evaluation. Now, if Morris were to leave in the next year or so, and this is the one thing we've said all along about the possible future ascension, if you like Morris enough and believe in Chad Morris enough, if you think that he could be the head coach at Clemson and that's your ultimate goal, because there are some of you out there who are, for whatever reason, still wrapped up in the Dabo Swinney hate, say, you know what, let's find a way to get rid of Dabo and let's promote from within Chad Morris. The better scenario probably for you is for Morris to go somewhere, prove his worth as a head coach at the collegiate level, and then if things tank under Dabo Swinney, a.k.a. what just happened down at Auburn for Gene Chizik, then you can maybe bring him back if he were to be willing to coach at Clemson as the head guy. And I'm not sure that that's what he wants, as I said earlier. I think he's looking at Texas. I think he's looking at Texas A&M. I think he's hoping that one of those two jobs is the first legitimate job he gets offered. Scott says, don't get me started on the Dabo haters. Get Tommy's question out of the chat room. You can join us live on Spreecast. We got a bunch of people here with us this evening. Bryce says, what do you think about the Demarcus Robinson decommit? Well, Demarcus Robinson and his commitment to Florida is odd in some ways and expected in others. There are a couple of things you need to know about Robinson, first and foremost, if you didn't realize this. One, his cousin was a South Carolina Gamecock. Wide receiver at Carolina, Marcus Robinson. Now, that does not mean that you can't come to Clemson. James Davis, anybody? Mike Davis? It doesn't mean that. But there was his commitment to Clemson when it first came out was a little bit of a surprise, I think, for a lot of people. As we came closer to this period, though, where he can enroll and start early, he was going to be an early enrollee. I really thought that he was going to come to Clemson. I know we started hearing some things. And I wonder to some degree if Chad Morris and this whole incident that's gone on had anything to do with it. But give Florida credit for the fact that they realized that they are lacking skill position players. Clemson's coaching staff felt like DeMarcus Robinson could be a really good wide receiver in this system. Clemson has proven, I think when you look at what they've done with Nuke Hopkins, the numbers that were put up by Sammy Watkins last season, that the wide receiving position at Clemson is going to be one that has an absolute wealth of opportunities. Whether you have 5 guys who are great, 7 guys who are great, it doesn't matter how many spots you fill when you're running 102 plays a game, 98 plays a game. When you're getting 30 more plays a game in than most ball clubs are, there are opportunities for more players and more great skill position guys. But the thing Florida had going for them in this situation, and eventually sold him on it so far, assuming that his commitment sticks. Now the time frame is much shorter because he's still going to enroll early at Florida. But they went with the SEC versus the ACC argument. And the other side of this that they were able to feed him is, look, if you go to Clemson, is Nuke Hopkins leaving? You don't know, son. Sammy Watkins is going to be there. Now, we've got the Martavis Bryant incident. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. That's got to have you a little bit concerned. But Martavis, with the issues that he had in the classroom and study hall, not going to be participating in the Chick-fil-A bowl game. Sharon Peak, Adam Humphreys, Hopper. You can go on and on down the list. Maybe North is a guy that comes in. You know, they're getting in his ear. Hey, there's 7 guys there. And you could say, well, you want a kid who wants to compete. You want a kid who wants to be there in the trenches. And he's looking at Florida and saying their leading receiver had 500 and some odd yards this year. I'm going to go there. I can be the number one. I can go there and I can be the Sammy Watkins, not play with the Sammy Watkins. I could be the Sammy Watkins. 1 loss this season. Great defense. A real chance to play for a powerhouse program. One of those, again, we go back to it. Texas, Florida. You pick your top 5. If Florida's not in there, I'll be pretty surprised. Even given the fact that they haven't been what they once were. Many people out there, many players out there, they still remember the days. They'll throw up the gator chomp. It doesn't matter. Playing in the swamp, the SEC, and a chance for him to not be one of 7, but maybe the number 1 target in year number 1. I mean, let's be honest about this for a second. How do you think Clemson convinced Sammy Watkins? What was it about Clemson that allowed us to bring in the number 1 wide receiver in the recruiting class in America just a couple of years ago? It was a lack of talent at that position. Florida's capitalizing on the SEC and a big need. Let's hope that Clemson, we talk about losing players, let's hope that Clemson gains some on the defensive side of the ball as far as recruits go, because that's where the issues really lie right now. We'll be right back.
The top of your lungs and we'll party like it's 1981.
Do you suffer from a chronic case of the woohoo during football games? Do your Saturdays sound something a bit like this? Well, TigerNet Talk is out to fix that. If we can band together, we can change this reoccurring issue. With a simple, go Tigers, go, you can make a difference. Ban the woohoo. Do yourself a favor. And as always, go Tigers. Take Take your business to the next level with innovative website design from Foodog Media. Foodog can handle all your web, graphic, and social media needs. Call them today, 843-864-9268. That's 843-864-9268. Mention this ad and receive 10% off of your website. Foodog is a Clemson-owned business. See their portfolio at www.foodogmedia.net. May the food be with you. G-Dog General Dentistry at Oak Grove is located on Highway 1 near the Barnyard Flea Market. Modern, relaxing dentistry with TVs and headphones in every room, nitrous and even oral sedation. Digital diagnostic x-rays for better quality and 85% less radiation exposure. And check out their new Clemson Patient Special. Mention that you heard about G-Dog here on the Clemson Sports Talk programs and receive an extra 5% off all services through football season. If you don't have a regular dentist, go see my dentist, Dr. Rick Jackson at G-Dog. That's General Dentistry at Oak Grove.
Hate the thought of shopping? All that hassle and can't find what you're looking for anyway? We understand. Retail stores make it difficult. Instead, try www.edistooutdoors.com. Edisto Outdoors features performance apparel and gear engineered for performance, comfort, and style. EdistoOutdoors.com. You'll enjoy the shopping and you'll enjoy the products. Great products from people who care.
Blake Austin of South Carolina Farm Bureau is an insurance agent you can count on to meet all your needs. Home, auto, health, life, you name it, Blake's got you covered, and he can save you on your yearly rates. Call him now for a free quote, 803-259-5008. That's 803-259-5008. Or just go to ClemsonSportsTalk.com and click on the Farm Bureau logo to be connected to Blake. Do like I do and work with the best agent around, and you can tweet that. Oh yeah, Tiger fans, it's the holiday season. I don't know how many shopping days are left, but I haven't done any yet, so I'm falling behind rapidly. But I pretty much, I somehow find a way to get it done, as I'm sure most of you do as well. I hate the hustle and bustle of the holiday season, but I definitely enjoy the holidays and the rest and relaxation. As you are aware, we will continue with the TigerNet Talks Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Sunday nights, though, however, we're off, taking a little break until January the 6th with the Clemson Hotline. We'll keep you up to date on that on Twitter. We're at Clemson Sports. Tweet to us, hashtag TN Talk. Phone lines are open, 803-450-0086. A great group in the chat room. Please come back each and every week and join us. I can't keep up with it. I wish I could, the chat room. You've got your own little show going on there, but I can pick some gems out every once in a while and pop them up on the screen and talk about them, which I really like. And I'll get my final things in here because I've seen some questions coming up in the chat room about this and people talking about it. I'm going to go with what Bryce says here. Bryce says, do you, when and if Chad leaves, think we'll go back to the smash mouth up the gut style of the 80s or continue with our finesse style of play? I like the way you put that, Bryce. I think there's a lot of people that would prefer to see the smash mouth Coach Ford style, but I think this is here to stay as long as Dabo Swinney's the coach. I think you can look at a team like Oregon, and whether you want to believe, and maybe even to some degree if you want to, Auburn, the year they won the championship, that this style has an opportunity to work. It has a chance to get you in to the national championship game, and maybe in certain cases you can win it. But what do you see coming out of the SEC? The teams like Alabama, the teams like LSU, they can pound you to the ground. They play tough, hard-nosed defense, and they don't make a whole lot of mistakes offensively. The one thing that a system like Chad Morris's does that I think is the one risk, and there are a lot of old-school coaches that didn't like to throw the football because 2 out of the 3 things that can happen are bad. Incomplete and an interception are the 2 bad things, and a completion is the only good thing that can really happen. Now, fortunately, a guy like Taj Boyd has had a great couple of seasons in this system Whether you look at the first half of both years, the past couple of years, and say, well, things tailed off a little bit at the end, you could equate that to competition, though, I think, to some degree. But had Taj Boyd not been as good as he was, would this love affair still exist for Chad Morris? There's a nice relationship between those two. Taj, I think, after you see the projections of the NFL where they have him tabbed, I'm pretty sure he's going to be coming back. I don't see any scenario in which he wouldn't. Deshaun Watson, though, 2 years down the road, a quarterback who I think will be brilliant in this system. We can get our hoodies on. We can talk. We can talk about Chad Kelly all we want to. The kid who I can't wait to see is still playing high school ball down in Georgia. And as long as Morris is at Clemson, I think you got a good shot. It could, though, eventually affect his recruitment down the road if he were to get a big program. Because if he feels like it's Morris and not a Clemson offense, he very well could go. We got an email from our good friend Kevin Brown out in the military, out in, I believe it's Washington State. He says, I heard this theory about bringing Brian Dawkins in as the new secondary coach. It got me very excited. Any reason why that doesn't make sense? Is it a possibility? Here's what I'll say about it. It makes all the sense in the world in the standpoint of bringing great defensive players in. So many of these guys grew up watching a guy like Brian Dawkins on the field for the Eagles. A guy like Brian Dawkins just being an unbelievable Hall of Fame safety in the NFL. A game changer. They picture him flapping and doing everything that he did to make his name known across the country. And maybe a lot of people didn't realize that he was from Clemson at the time. I think your avid NFL fan knew that. But there are a number of players who really look up to this guy. If you could have him on staff, it would be great. The problem you have is this, a lack of coaching experience. You can say, hey, he's got playing experience. He's an expert analyst. He does a fantastic job for the NFL Network. But that's the problem. He's got a sweet gig. The stress that he is under at the NFL Network pales in comparison to the stress that he would be put under if he were a coach. Love to have him. Would love to have him on the field, on the sidelines, bringing players in. I'd also love to have him on the show. I'm doing what I can. I'm still digging on Dawk. I want Brian Dawkins to come join us. He doesn't have to be my co-host. He doesn't have to be in studio. Just a week. Just give me one episode. Let me ask you my Clemson 10, Dawkins. This is my plea to Tiger Nation. Tweet to him. Tell him to come on. Come on the program. Come on TigerNet Talk. And let's hear about his time in the NFL. His thoughts maybe on the Clemson Tiger defense and all of that. But I will say, Kevin, I do appreciate you listening. I know you're miles away, but your questions will never go unanswered here on the program. We'll always get to them. Ray says, what in the world is going on with Ryan Jenkins? 2 weeks ago, he's trying to convince every other guy out there to commit to Clemson. Now he acts like he's not going to even end up at Clemson. What happened there in that situation is that they opened up offers to all legacy recruits. The Jenkins family, his dad, Ryan's dad, played at Clemson. Martin and Ryan's dad played at Tennessee. Excuse me. Got my university's flip-flop there. So that opened up the opportunity. They've reached out to him. I think it's all the initial excitement, but I do think he plays in college with his brother at Clemson. But I see people talking about freeing things up in the chat room with defensive players that we could possibly pick up by losing some of the offensive talent. But Ryan Jenkins, if you listen to the program, you know he's not a guy I've been high on as far as the wide receivers. He's a smaller wide receiver. I'm just not so sure that we couldn't have done a little bit better with that spot initially when things looked like they were filling up. Now with some openings, though, you definitely want to keep him in the fold, and you like the fact that he is a very positive kid who's out there recruiting and selling Clemson's brand. Ray, do appreciate your email. Ray sent us the email, and Kevin sent the email to clemson81@gmail.com. As always, you can do that. We'd love to hear from you. And our man Norm gave us a phone call. I told you we'd be hearing from Norm. Let's hear what Norm has to say about your Clemson Tigers.
Hey, Lawton. I listened to your show last week, and you had a great show. This is Norm again, and I want to say that we have a great opportunity to hire a outstanding defensive coach. Charlie Harbison is leaving, and I think that he's a good coach, and I think that he's a great person, but the bottom line is that he wasn't getting the job done in the secondary, and you know as well as I know that the secondary has been underperforming at least for the past 2 years. And I know that there's been a lot of injuries, and we had to play some inexperienced players, but the bottom line is that Harbison wasn't getting the job done. Now we have an opportunity to bring in a defensive coach that could possibly elevate our defensive staff and our defensive team even more. So I look forward to the opportunity, but I also wish Harbaugh great success in Auburn.
And I think a lot of people feel that way, to be honest with you, Norm, about Charlie Harbison. I mean, it's one of those things that you hate to see him go because obviously he's an outstanding recruiter. But the criticism that we continually had on the program, especially once the defensive front started playing better, was the fact that the back end, cornerbacks, DBs, the safeties, they didn't take good angles. They didn't react to the ball well. They didn't keep their head on a swivel. They looked lost at times. And at some point, that has to come down to coaching. And that's the reason, another reason, when I think you look at who this hire is going to be. We thought maybe there was some speculation coming out that it could be a guy like Tommy Thigpen out of Auburn. However, he took the job at Tennessee. And so now you're still trying to put the pieces together and find a guy who can bring in, I think, great recruiting ties. If not to the Southeast, can you find somebody who's done a lot elsewhere, the Midwest, somebody where you can maybe expand your branches a little bit and start pulling in more players from maybe Texas? And I think we've seen a little bit of a benefit from that to some degree when you think of Chad Morris, when you think of Brent Venables being on this staff, that Midwestern approach. Could you find somebody that's been even further out west, maybe out to California? Could you find somebody who has better ties maybe right now to Florida than maybe you've got in some scenarios? And Clemson's done a great job of recruiting Florida, but I think this hire not only has to be somebody who can do a great job on the field, it's somebody who's got to have relationships that they can build off the field as well. So, where that decision-making process goes, I don't know right now. I've got a couple of guys in mind, but I wonder, and Dabo Swinney doesn't seem like he's very anxious, oddly enough, to make this move. And you have to wonder, when we talk about Chad Morris, you have to wonder, is it affecting recruiting as well in some other areas and for some other recruits to not have that position shored up yet either? So, I've got to believe that Dabo Swinney wants to do what's best for this program. Sometimes these bowl games will play out and the guys will become a little bit more available. People may be telling Dabo, look, I'd love to come, but I don't want to start anything up right now at this other program. I just don't want it in the news yet. I'm kind of waiting to finish up the bowl season. That may be Dabo Swinney's MO here, is just to hold off and wait a little bit. And I can't blame him if that's what he wants to do. It's clearly his decision. We've got to get to Martavis Bryant. We've talked a little bit about DeMarcus Robinson already. We've got your questions from the chat room and a whole lot more on the final segment here of TigerNet Talk, Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Woo, the chat room has got me fired up, I'm telling you. I wish I could keep up with everything in there. We'll be right back, though, with more TigerNet Talk right after these words from our sponsors.
It wasn't nothing she ever thought about. Didn't know it was gone the day she moved out. In my head, if I pointed it just right.
We scoop the boot, dutycalls.com. When nobody else will do it, dutycalls.com. To make that thought poop go away, call or click for a free quote today.
When nature calls, we answer. To get a free quote for dog poop removal, go to dutycalls.com now.
DOODYCALLS. Dutycalls.com.
In the Midlands area, dial 1-800-DUTY-CALLS. They're number one and number two. Take your business to the next level with innovative website design from Foodog Media. Foodog can handle all your web, graphic, and social media needs. Call them today, 843-864-9268. That's 843-864-9268. Mention this ad and receive 10% off of your website. Foodog is a Clemson-owned business. See their portfolio at www.foodogmedia.net. May the food be with you. Blake Austin of South Carolina Farm Bureau is an insurance agent you can count on to meet all your needs. Home, auto, health, life, you name it, Blake's got you covered, and he can save you on your yearly rates. Call him now for a free quote, 803-259-5008. That's 803-259-5008. Or just go to ClemsonSportsTalk.com and click on the Farm Bureau logo to be connected to Blake. Do like I do and work with the best agent around, and you can tweet that. Hey there, Clemson Tiger fans. If you're interested in advertising with Clemson Podcasts, go to ClemsonPodcasts.com and click on the advertising link. And as always, go Tigers! Final segment, TigerNet Talk. I'm your host, Lawton Swan. Glad to be here with you. Could I please get that Clemson podcast commercial changed? For crying out loud. But if you do want to advertise with us on Clemson Sports Talk, ClemsonSportsTalk.com, email us Clemson81@gmail.com. We'll get in touch with you with all our prices and packages. It's the best thing going today. Woo! That's a little old school reference there. You guys know it. You like the Four Horsemen. You guys like the Four Horsemen. Lots of questions to get to here on the program. I do want to talk, though, briefly about my disappointment in Martavis Bryant out from the Chick-fil-A Bowl. Kid who averaged over 30 yards per catch this season had really come on. I think you could see a star in the making to some degree. When the numbers game kind of came out and you started looking at Nuke Hopkins and his future and the belief that Nuke may leave, the one good thing you had in your back pocket, you felt good, was, okay, well, that's all right. If Nuke goes, Martavis can just step in. And I think when the initial suspension came out, people said, hey, that no problem, get things squared away. He'll be back. But then the realization that he is 3 years removed from high school after spending a year at prep school. The realization that if you're going to prep school, school probably wasn't your thing in the first place. It's probably been a struggle along the way for him. The best thing that we've heard so far, though, was Dabo Swinney basically saying that this was more of an issue with study hall, and hopefully, if that's the case, and this is not about F's in classes and more about responsibilities of the student athlete, then maybe he returns no matter what. But the possibility has got to be, you've got to at least take into account that the NFL Combine is a meat market. And when the numbers came out and people talked about who was the fastest guy on this team this year, and it was Martavis Bryant who would run the fastest time, you look at his size, you think about what he could be down the road, the type of elite wide receiver that he could be. I mean, he's a real threat. I mean, when you start, if you're a defensive coordinator and you start looking at Clemson's offense, you're thinking to yourself, the only thing that we can do to be successful is to get to the quarterback. They don't scheme. They're not scheming for how to cover the wide receivers, because they're really uncoverable to some degree. You can say, well, what happened in the South Carolina game, Swanee? If they're so uncoverable in the South, what happened there? Where were the opportunities there? Defensive line. Flat out, that's where it came from. Now, if you want to say to me, why didn't a guy like Sammy Watkins get the ball on a reverse? Why were there no handoffs to Sammy Watkins? Why didn't Watkins carry the football? Where were the wide receiver screens, those quick plays? Look, hey, I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to ask Coach Morris that. I don't have that answer. But You don't scheme for Clemson to figure out how to stop the wide receivers. You scheme for Clemson to figure out how to put pressure on Taj Boyd, how to make him make tough throws, how to get him a little bit rattled. So it is disappointing, though. It is very disappointing for Clemson Tiger Nation to have to absorb that just a few weeks before going up against a very good LSU defense. Corey wants to know, do you think Ben Boulware will be a big pickup for the defense? I hear he's been killing guys during Shrine Bowl practice. That's big news that he's one of the top performers right now at the Shrine Bowl with what he's been able to do, and I guess we'll see after that ball game how things pan out in live game, when the bullets are flying, when you're in action. Here's what I always get a little bit skeptical about, and I don't know why. I always get a little bit wary for some reason at anybody who comes out of Pendleton, Anderson, Easley, Daniel High School, anywhere that's in the immediate proximity of Clemson, no matter how good they are in high school, for some reason. And maybe that's just me being a little bit naive to the fact that obviously we know that there's great talent in the state of South Carolina. Lots of that talent, though, comes out of the Low Country. You're starting to see a big influx, though, of talent out of the Rock Hill, Fort Mill area. I think some of that has to do with that Charlotte area and how that's kind of worked its way down in and almost blended into the state of South Carolina to some degree. In that region, you've seen a big improvement in the talent in that spot. But anytime you're right there in the backyard, I just always kind of look at things with bated breath and wait and see it. It's a wait and see approach for me. But I was pleasantly surprised, I'll tell you that, Corey, to hear that he was doing such a good job. And I think it was a pleasant surprise for most people who've been following his recruitment that he's done such a good job so far. But I'm going to hold off until we see. But for crying out loud, I mean, what do I know at this point? I was all in on a guy like Stephon Anthony, and I'm not saying that Stephon has been a big disappointment, but I think there is a little bit of angst amongst the fan base that if this coming season he's not flat-out beast mode, there's tremendous disappointment. And I think everybody's fair. Chris says Anderson football sucks. I live in Anderson. Chris said it, not me. Send your emails and tweets to Chris. Say, please, leave me alone. Norman says that head coach is the foundation of the program, so if Morris leaves, I still think that Dabo can get the job done. Down the road, I think that's the ultimate goal for everybody with Dabo Swinney. I think people have seen that great head coaches can spend a ton of time at a program and can continue to go through the losses of coordinators. That probably is a goal as a head coach, because if you're getting guys in who other people want, you're getting good guys. If you're getting guys in that are turning into head coaches, you're beginning to create a coaching tree. Now, you can look at basketball and Brad Brownell's new coaching tree that's happened that's kind of sprung up by chance. Not because Brad Brownell's not a good coach, but the situations that kind of happened where a couple of brand new guys got picked up at head coaching jobs and never really spent any time really with Clemson. But in this scenario, I think Dabo Swinney, you don't want to consider him a figurehead at this point. I think you want him to be the face of the program for a while, and if he's here long enough and is successful enough and people continue to stick by him, that he gets to the point where he can be a figurehead, where he could just be the Bobby Bowden after the game and not really know what happened. The one muff wearing Bobby Bowden, or not even one. Really, it was more like Bobby when he needed an earmuff. He just asked for it. He was like, "Hey, can I hold that headset for a second? I just want to tune in for a minute. I just want to kind of think about maybe what's happening out there." Bryce wants to know, what do I think about the rudeness from LSU fans? I know it goes both ways, but they are right up there with the South Carolina fans. Guess what, Bryce? Look, I don't know how old you are. I can look at your little avatar. I think you're pretty young fella compared to the rest of our listening audience. You guys aren't old, though. You're just seasoned. Those guys, the other guys are just seasoned. And gals. Don't let me forget the ladies who are here with us. Bryce, that's what happens when you win. That's what happens when you're good. And rudeness can often, or maybe a little attitude can be perceived as rudeness. But you know what? LSU plays in the best division in college football, and they're one of the top two teams, and they're not afraid to come talk a little trash. they're not afraid to come talk a little smack to Clemson about what they're going to do to the Tigers in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. They have no fear. We went through it on Clemson Hotline Sunday night. Their losses in the last 4 seasons, I believe it was, were to number 1 ranked Florida, a number 1 ranked Alabama, a 2 ranked Alabama, a 3 ranked Alabama, like a 5 ranked Auburn team, a 10 ranked Florida team, a 11 ranked Penn State, a 12 ranked Arkansas, and an unranked Ole Miss team. Whether we like them or not right now, whether you think it's rude or not, they got a lot of trash they can talk. And maybe they hadn't, stomped us down recently. Maybe they haven't exactly smacked us around in the past 4 seasons, but they've smacked a lot of great teams around, and they're not afraid of a high-powered offense out of the ACC coming to Atlanta to take them on in the SEC. No way are they scared. Scott wants to know, does Chad Kelly have enough swag to play defense for the Clemson Tigers? I think Chad Kelly's got enough swag, Scott, for you to play defense for the Clemson Tigers. And finally, Bryce wants to know, do you agree it's time to get out of the ACC? Let me tell you, you people who are in the chat room watching the show live on Spreecast on the front page of TigerNet.com and on the front page of ClemsonSports.com, let me show you my notes for where we were going here on the program. What does that say? ACC versus SEC. The pros, the cons, the ins, the outs. It kind of goes back to DeMarcus Robinson and his commitment to Florida, saying that basically playing in the SEC was a better thing for him. There are going to be more and more kids who are hearing that argument. It's the argument that Ole Miss is trying to sway a guy like Robert Kimdichie on. It's the argument that Montravius Adams is hearing on a daily basis. And for Clemson, while we play what we believe to be SEC football in the ACC, much like Florida State fans would want you to hear and to say to their possible recruits, Clemson has started a climb. You've gotten to a 10-win season a couple of times. A big victory over LSU would do a lot to jumpstart recruiting coming into this coming February for National Signing Day. Then if you can win, obviously these recruits that really want to affect in this cycle, but then if you can open the season with a win over a very good Georgia football team, that's what we're talking about. If you can't play in the SEC, every chance you get to play a team from the SEC, you have to get the job done. And unfortunately for Clemson, against the South Carolina Gamecocks, and what most people, I think, when you look at Auburn and the way their season tailed off, that win against Auburn in Atlanta to start the year didn't mean a thing to most people out there in America. Nobody. Nobody in the SEC is going to give you credit for that. Nobody in the ACC really cares about it. Most of you Clemson fans would go, the Auburn win, wasn't a big deal. You didn't walk out of Atlanta feeling that way, but when you look back on it, remember the excitement leaving the game? Going home, driving home, talking about, oh, man, yeah, beat that Auburn team. Guess what? It didn't mean a whole lot after they tanked for the season. And that's why this game against LSU, to wrap the season up where it all started, to put a fancy little bow on it, to make it come full circle, will be important for your Clemson Tigers. We got to go. 1 hour in the books here on TigerNet Talk. The chat room has been great. We had a lot of extra questions that I didn't get a chance to get to. The screen queue was getting full, but I hope you'll join us next week, Clemson Tiger fans, right here on TigerNet Talk, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Tweet to us, #TN Talk. Follow us on Twitter. We're at Clemson Sports. Send us an email, clemson81@gmail.com. All the goodness right here below us. But we'll be back Wednesday night, 9 p.m. And until then, as always, y'all take care now, and go Tigers!